Hello tankers, this is NK33 again. This is the third in my series of videos, and if you're looking at this and wondering what happened to the World of Tanks client, well, this isn't the World of Tanks client. This is a program called Tank Viewer. There's a similar program called Tank Inspector, but I don't have permission to show you, so I'm not going to show it to you. This particular program has been abandoned by its owner, but it's being kept up by a few people in the WoT forum, so I will give you the download link to this and the link to the forum posts where you can update this to have its full functionality. I actually prefer this to the Tank Inspector because this resides solely on your computer, so if your internet is not all it should be, or if you want to take this on your laptop, you can continue to use your Tank Inspector. Now, the tank I've got in front of you right now is a Panzer II-J. It is a bit of a legend. It is a terrifically troll tank. It's got the same armor as a KV-1, and it is a Tier 3. Now, Tank Inspector and Tank Viewer allow you to divide up the tanks by nation, by category. This is a light tank, and by tier. So I can go to Tier 3, and there's the Panzer II-J. The other thing that this system allows you to do is tank options up here. You can switch out the turret and the gun. You can also put in the various camos so you can actually look at the gun, and we'll show that a little later. But the other thing that allows you to do is, hide the geometry, which means if you want to hide the chassis, it goes away and you're now looking at the side. You can hide the hull. You can hide the turret. You can hide the gun. But the best part of it, go over here. This is called Armor Inspector. Click on that, and it shows up. And you can go from what's called the textured, which is the surface of the tank, to the collision model. Now, these colors represent thicknesses of the armor, and you can click on a particular color and it'll show you every place that armor thickness exists. Now, the red through yellow are the standard armors, and the bluish are spaced armors. You can also go down here and click hide the spaced armor. But to show you why this thing was such a monster, that's 80 millimeters of armor. That's right here. There's 70 millimeters of armor. There's 60, and I'm not quite sure where that 60 is, but the sides are 50. As I said, this has the same armor as a KV-1. Now, what you can do with this program also is when you're talking about angling your armor. Now, with the Armor Inspector on, you can put the crosshairs over, hold down the Control key, click the mouse button, and over here you'll have the effective armor. Now, in this case, at the angle I'm firing at, the nominal armor is 80, the effective armor is 88. And it talks about free travel, which means that it will travel a short distance and it'll hit 25 millimeters of armor, which is probably down here. Okay. But if you angle the armor, all of a sudden this slight angle coming at it is 120 millimeters of armor, and the side, which is nominally 50, is 88 millimeters of armor. That's what they mean by angling your armor. You are increasing the effective thickness, the distance that the shell will have to push through. Now, when they talk about weak spots, as you can see, you've got these areas which are slightly different color. The bulk of the armor on the side is 50 millimeters. Those weak spots are 40, and you see this little slot here? You get the cursor positioned over it. Hold down the control key, click it, 0. Which means if you hit this little hatch with a high explosive shell, which has a burst radius of even a tiny amount, it may find this weak point and go in. Which means this supposedly invincible tank can be taken out with fairly regularly HE of even 57 millimeters. So it's not as invincible as it seems. The same thing of these two vision slits. 0 effective armor. Even highly angled shots at this vision slit, 0 effective armor. That's how, when someone says aim for weak spots, this is how you find the weak spots. Typically it's your vision slits, it's the side of the armor, and this program will allow you to look at all of the tanks in the game and determine what's weak, what isn't. Let's go with a completely insane example. One of the heaviest tanks in the game. Let's go up to tier 10. The mouse. In this case I got to use the mouse scroll wheel to move out because the mouse is much larger. Okay, so you've got 240 millimeters of armor there and there, 210 on the sides, 200 millimeters of sloped armor in the front, which means if you're in front of a mouse and you fired right dead center, you're trying to go through 300 millimeters of effective armor, and if you fire at this lower plate, it's 275 millimeters of armor. And if the mouse angles itself somewhat, you fire at this plate, 332 millimeters of armor. There are very few tanks in the game which can penetrate that kind of armor, even with premium. Sides, 210 millimeters of nominal armor. At this angle, it's 246. Remember, those sides are sloped anyway, so if you're a shorter tank and you're firing at it, it's going to be even worse. 210 millimeters of armor, 240. This also gets into what they call side scraping. You come at an enemy like that. Let's go to options. Let's rotate the turret. Other way. You're hiding that weak lower plate behind a building. You're shooting around it, and you're not giving them a huge amount of space to hit you with. That's, most tanks will be in that condition. So you fire at the side, 537 millimeters of effective armor, and the front, which you're not showing very much of, 353 millimeters of armor. That's why when you see a mouse doing this, when he's reloading, he'll turn the turret away from you, so 240 millimeters of armor treated as 257. What they may do, fire at the side. Now you see where that says that's an automatic ricochet, and this is 254 millimeters of armor. That's what side scraping is about. And also trying to find weak points on this armor. Let's go down to, let's say, 50 points of armor. The only place you're going to find 50 points of armor is the treads and the roof, which means you're not going to be able to find too many places to get up above a mouse and shoot down on it. But you notice these purplish areas. You fire there, 0 armor. That's a weak spot. Fire at this cupola, 0 armor. That's a weak spot. That's a weak spot. So there are ways you can fire at even as heavily armored a tank as a mouse and do some damage, but you've got to be pretty accurate, which means you probably are going to have to be pretty close, or you're going to have a very powerful HE round to be able to do any damage. Let's look at something that's... oh, you can also rotate the tank if you want. Say you want to see something at a specific angle. You can rotate the turret independently, and you can also elevate the gun, which is another thing that you're going to run into a lot. Your gun elevation and your gun depression, which will determine how well you can deal with hills. So, you'll hear people talking about the hull down. That's basically hiding this entire portion of your tank behind a hill, so you can only see the turret. And as you can see there fairly easily, your gun depression is going to affect how much of your tank you can hide when you're pointing with the crest of the hill. Let's take a look at a tank you are likely to run into. The mouse that I showed you in the first place is an extremely rare tank. You can probably buy one as of May 2015 for about $1,600. It has a reputation for being a very troll tank, a very heavily armored tank, and to a certain extent that reputation is deserved. But as I'll show you later in the video, it got that reputation before a lot of the more current armor vehicles were available. The line of tank destroyers and some of the other Japanese and Chinese mediums. I'll show you on Tank Compare a little later. Okay, this is the S-35. It's jokingly called the Minnie Mouse because its armor is so good for its tier. 42 millimeters of armor on the turret, 40 millimeters on the side, 47 millimeters on the front. So it's a pretty formidably armed small vehicle. However, as you can see from those slots, zero effective armor. It's still got weak spots. Zero effective armor there. Now, tank options. You can change the turret. You can change the gun. And probably what you want to do here is switch back to textured, so you can get a look at what the tank looks like with the various guns, so you can recognize that that tank is going to have terrible penetration. You don't have to be as worried about it. That tank you'd better be worried about, because that gun is a lot better than the stock gun. And if they've got the stock turret, that's going to be a lot weaker than the fully upgraded turret. Yeah. 40 millimeters of armor. And let's go back to the other turret. That was 42. So actually the stock turret is a little better in terms of the armor protection. But this is one of the ones you are likely to see, and it's a pretty decent tank. Very good armor, well sloped, and very thick. And that's why it got the nickname the Minnie Mouse, because of that durability. Let's take a look at Tank Compare and take a look at the Panzer II-J on Tank Compare. Okay, we're back, and Panzer II-J, and I'll have a link for Tank Compare, was basically, I mean, it says retired, but this is a premium that was very rarely available. You had to basically get one from the Russian server. It was very limited availability. It was available, as far as I know, one day on the European server, on April Fool's Day. Now, it originally was an absolute terror because of that fantastic armor. It was slow, as you can see, very low horsepower per weight per ton ratio, very bad terrain resistance, and quite frankly, the gun it used is similar to the gun that you get on the LOL tractor. That's the German Tier 1 like tractor, although it's jokingly called the LOL tractor. So it's a Tier 1 gun on a Tier 3 vehicle. Now, it was also a terror because there weren't a lot of the tank destroyers which are currently in the game. It's not a terror anymore because you get vehicles like the Su-76 and the T-82. Let's take a look at that armor. 80 millimeters of armor on the front of the turret, 50 millimeters on the sides and rear of the front of the turret. The gun only does 11 points of damage. It's got terrible penetration, 23 millimeters, which means it'll have a bit of trouble penetrating the front of an Su-76. This thing will practically always be firing APCR, gold ammunition, which is very expensive. Now, as a way of compensation or comparison, this 57 millimeter gun on the Su-76 has 75 millimeters of penetration. Now remember, that's plus or minus 25%, which means you stand a pretty good chance of penetrating that 80 millimeters of frontal armor. In this case, the Tu-82 has, the derp gun, has 53 millimeters of penetration, but it generates 410 damage, which means you hit a Panzer II-J, you're going to be wrecking modules, and if you hit it on the side, especially on one of those weak points, you're going to just kill it with one shot. So, as formidable as it once was, if you know what you're doing, it really isn't that formidable a machine. Now, yes, you could fire APCR of your own at it in the Su-76, but you know, it's 5 gold. That's not really worth it. I mean, you can take one of these down with ordinary ammunition. The hit points per minute is high because of the high rate of fire on that 20 millimeter cannon, but the penetration is so awful that you're not going to be able to do a lot of damage to some of the more heavily armored vehicles at Tier 2 and Tier 3. Reload time. Which is why the stats here indicate you're going to be losing 20,000 credits or more per match. Remember, every APCR shot is 1 gold or 400 credits. You know, I'll let you do the math, but You know, that's a couple hundred rounds of pure APCR that they're firing in each match. And even if they get credits for destroying the enemy, they're losing more credits on ammunition. So this is basically a troll tank for seal clubbing. Okay, this is a game I played on Ensk, and as you can see up there, there is Panzer II-J. Now, I've got the Su-76 with the 57mm. Now, he's already talking trash, basically how he's going to take us all out. Well, I decided I was going to give him a little surprise. I knew about the Panzer II-J's weak points. I had 5 rounds of APCR, and even with regular ammunition, I could probably do a pretty good job against him. So I decided that as soon as he showed up, I was going to take him out. And it turns out that the T-82 on our team had the same idea. So there. There he is. He just showed up at the edge of my radar, right near that circle. Well, and you can see that T-82 is also heading in. So suddenly Mr. Invincible has 2 tank destroyers that can take him out. That's one hit. Now, he's shooting at me because he thinks I'm the more dangerous target. But he's letting the T-82 get on his flank. And that is that for him. Well, tankers, this is the World of Tanks forum, specifically the forum for the tank viewer in Asia, in North America, Europe, and this is the forum post where they discuss how to update the tank viewer to the latest version. It's on the North American server. I will include links for all of these in the description of the video. I hope this was useful, and if it was, please consider giving it a like or subscribing to the channel. And I'm going to leave you with a little more view of Tank Viewer in action. Well, tankers, that's it for this 3rd episode of iNoob So You Don't Have To. Just wanted to show you a few more tricks in the Tank Viewer. Now, since this is a premium, you can't change the turret and you can't change the gun. but you can look at the destroyed condition of the tank, and you can enable the collision model, which is basically how you look at the armor without the penetration value. You can also rotate the tank, rotate the turret, rotate the gun, there are also ways of getting screenshots of the tank. I'm not going to go into them at this time. I leave that to you to play with. Mainly, I suggest you use this for developing, figuring out weak points and figuring out how to angle your tanks. The entire, most of the tanks in the game are modeled. I believe all of them are. And so you can look at each one and look at the armor, look at the configurations. And I hope this is as useful to you as it has been for me. Thank you. Bye.